All right, so in today's lesson of PHP Fundamentals, I'm going to try to introduce something a little bit more fun. I'm aware that so far we've focused pretty much exclusively on the language, and I've done that on purpose. You need to have a solid understanding of the syntax in the language and how it works before you can actually begin getting things on the page. But that said, I'm aware that this is the fun part, so in today's lesson, we're going to review includes, and you'll learn how you can take a long index page and split it out into fragments so that each is easier to maintain. All right, let's get started. If I open up my sites directory and I go into my sandbox, you'll see that I've created a new directory called includes. Within it, I've added one index.html file, and I've opened this in Sublime Text 2. So the first step is we need some HTML, because this is going to represent that standard index.html file that we're all familiar with. So we'll go ahead and add some HTML here. I will add a doc type. And at the top, I'm going to add a header and maybe an H1 within it, and the heading 1 will just be called My Website. And then maybe you have a navigation section in here. You can have lots of stuff. Next, we're going to have the main content, and within here, I'll simply add a paragraph that references the main content, or represents the main content. And then finally, you have your footer, and this is where you can put copyright information. Maybe you have a smaller version of your logo. Maybe you have additional navigation options. Again, this paragraph tag will represent that. So now we have this index.php page, but right now it just has HTML. But then maybe you open up a new file, and now you have about.php. And this is how you move from static websites to dynamic ones. So maybe in the past, you would simply copy everything within index.html to about.html. And then you would just change the information as needed, main content for the About page. But then you come into this situation where, let's come back, and now you've added some CSS. So you add a link tag at the top, style.css. Let's go ahead and create that. For now, we won't add anything in it. But now you've changed the first file. So what you then have to do, and we probably all remember doing this at one point, if you're not still doing it, is you copy that, then you have to go back to every other static page and include that link. And then maybe you add some script tags at the bottom, and we can actually get rid of that type equals text/JavaScript. But now, once again, you have to go back to the bottom again of every other page and paste that in. So needless to say, this doesn't scale well at all. Instead, we're going to take a look at how we can use includes to simplify this. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to close out about for now, and we'll stick exclusively within index.php. Next, we're going to create a folder, and you can either call this includes, a lot of people will call it inc, which represents includes. Overall, it doesn't really matter what you call it, just create that folder. So now, within this folder is where we will store all of our fragments. So the first one that we would want to include would be header. So within the includes folder, we'll create a file called header.php. You'll also see some people prefix fragments with an underscore. We're not going to worry about that for now, though. So now we have this new file, and what I can do is I can take everything leading up to the bottom of the header. I will cut that out and place it within header.php and save it. So now at this point, if we view what we have in the browser, and I view the source, you'll see, no, we don't have that header just yet. And of course we don't, we've sliced that out. So let's come back, and now at the top, within PHP, I'm going to include that header. Include, and we can either put this within parentheses, similar to the way we echo information, or we can just add the path after it. It doesn't really matter. inc header.php, and now I will close PHP. So now if I come back to the page and reload it, you'll see that now it's back. Great. But now we have separated our content. So let's continue on. Next, we're going to take the footer all the way to the bottom, slice that out, and I'll create a new file called footer.php and paste that information in. And now at the bottom, we will include the footer. Save it. I'll come back one more time. Yep, everything's still the same, but now we have a much cleaner file to work with. And this will be the shape that your files take. So now we can copy all of this. We can go to about.php, and now we're not having to duplicate anything. We can simply replace all of this, like so, and then we can change the main content as necessary. I'll reload the page. We have our My Website. We'll go to about.php, and now we have the About page, but it is pulling in those fragments. So with this technique, both index.php and about.php are sharing the exact same header, and we're not having to copy and paste anything. So now, at this point, let's say you have another style sheet that you want to include, maybe reset.css. Okay, well now you only have to add it exactly once. You add it to your fragment or to your includes file, then you come back and that will be represented on every page. So there's about, and then if we go to index.php, that's represented there as well. And clearly, this is a much smarter and drier solution. Now, in addition to include, we also have the option of using require. So let's save that, and if I come back, yep, we're getting the same thing. There's just a slight difference. With require, we are saying we require this file to move on, and if you can't find it, we need to fail. So let's try this out. Let's just change one letter. And now if I come back and reload the page, we're going to get this error. And notice that it triggered a fatal error because require depends on that file. If we instead change that to include, and I reload the page, we're still going to get the warning, of course, because we have instructed the error logging to display warnings, but we're not getting any kind of fatal error. Because in the case of includes, we're simply saying, yes, I would like to include this file. But with require, you're saying, I require this file to be included for my project to function as needed. So it's up to you to decide which one you need. In this case, we're going to stick with require, and I'll update the about page as well, because we do require these files to execute. And of course, I will go back to index.php and change that file back to one that we know. Good. So now you're familiar with include, require. There's also something called require once. And honestly, this is something I would just recommend don't use. It has its own downsides. The only difference is we're saying this file should be included a total of once. So if we try to include it again below, maybe we'll try to include it right down here. If I come back, reload the page, notice that it's not showing up. But if we were to change that to require, and I come back and reload the page, now it's showing up again. So that's the core difference. When you want to say this file should only ever be included one time, you would use require once. In this case, we stick with require because technically the advantage to using require once would come when you're using things like classes. So you can imagine maybe you have a project where one class depends on a different class, and then you maybe have another class, and that class depends on this class. That's when require once becomes helpful because you can run into situations where it's possible that you're including the same file more than one time in a project. So if you use require once, that's a way to protect against that and say, nope, only one time for the entire life cycle of this project should this file be included. But at this stage, I don't want you to use require once, stick with include or require.